Welcome, everyone, to the Voices of Humanity show here at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. And my name is Guy Dawson, and I have been conducting a series of interviews with people, families of people who have died at the hands of police over about the last 6 to 7 weeks. We are offering opportunities for people to be able to share their stories, and we've created this platform in order to share stories in a way that is a little bit different than they may traditionally have been presented in other aspects of the media. And today we have Eric Farah. He is the brother of Nicholas Farah, and Nicholas Farah is a man who died while in custody at Clark County Detention Center, and we just want to bring him on today to share his story. There are people that are attached to these news sites that we see as citizens. And one of the things that Voices of Humanity is all about is allowing us to hear more about the stories that we often do not hear about. And I've also got my good friend Nisa Sun. She is with Force Trajectory Project. She's going to be here to share some of the experiences that she has working with a lot of families who have very similar stories to what Eric is going to be talking about today. But Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Guy, for doing this and just bringing the awareness out to the public and letting people, letting voices of the families be heard. So I just think that's super important that, people are out there listening and hearing the other side that, never gets told.
Your brother died in 2019 while he was in custody at Clark County Detention Center. Could you share what you know about this? Share the story.
Yeah, so you're actually just coming back on vacation from Florida, or excuse me, from California. And my brother was actually traveling back from California and had a layover actually in Las Vegas. Got off the plane and he had an 8 hour 8 hour layover area before his next plane. So he got off the plane, went to a outlet mall to try to gather some things. He was looking for a cell phone battery. And in the meantime, of somewhere between in there, he was assaulted and some of his belongings, his backpack, were stolen from him. So he was actually called Las Vegas Metro on his own, asking for help, letting him know the situation, that he was mugged, assaulted, and that he was trying to get his stuff back, his belongings back, which is again, who wouldn't want their stuff back? You're traveling, all your belongings are with you, and he wasn't trying to cause any problems. But most importantly, he didn't want to press any charges against whoever did it. He didn't know who it was, but he didn't want to press any charges. That's the kind of guy that my brother was. Is he just wanted his stuff back and just go on his merry way. Shortly after that, he was at a hotel when he had called the police. And he was trying to gather some things and figure out how he was going to leave. He didn't have any money. The hotel was very short with him, and so they just asked him to leave, and he couldn't leave because he didn't have anywhere to go. So the hotel had actually called the Metro back again and reported him for trespassing. So that was the charge that my brother was actually arrested on, or he was being arrested of. It was trespassing. From there, he was brought into CCDC, Clark County Detention Center, and when he was removed from the vehicle, he was brought into the Sally Port, and he was still handcuffed. They had put him in a restraint chair as he was coming out of the car, and they were trying to get the police officer's handcuffs off him. So in the meantime of him trying to get the handcuffs off him, his hands are behind his back, and now they had to force his head down between his legs, and there was 4 officers standing around him, forcing his head down between his legs. for a couple minutes. Now, if you just do this in a little bit, if you just bend over a little bit, anyone listening, or I encourage anyone to try that. Just bend over a little bit, and you'll notice that you get very short breath. Well, imagine doing that for 2 to 3 minutes while four police officers, detention officers, are holding you down. You can hear him in the videos struggling for his life. He's telling him that he can't breathe. That he's yelling, asking them to stop. Please, please, I can't breathe anymore. And they don't hold up. Just like the George Floyd case, where over and over again you hear the situation about telling them that we can't breathe and we need help. There was medical people there, essentially standing behind him where they couldn't even see him, and they never once went and checked on my brother, or were aware of the situation of what was happening. That he was dying right in front of medical professionals and these four Clark County Detention Center officers. So essentially, by the time that they had finally gotten the handcuffs off, they had to pull him back up by his shoulders, and they had realized he was already deceased. He was already essentially killed in that moment, in those couple minutes, by the detention officers. They did call paramedics in. It took a couple minutes for them to arrive. But unfortunately, they already had done their damage, and the coroner's report and everything had gone along with that exact story about what's going on here. Is he had died of positional asphyxia. It was ruled a homicide. He was killed by the detention officers. Now, when it comes to what followed that, the police in Las Vegas Metro said we didn't do anything wrong. Um, it was ruled by a homicide by the coroner's office, by the state of Nevada, the coroner's office, that he was killed by these police officers. In these couple minutes, during this time frame of these couple minutes. Now, why are these police officers and the medical professionals who were standing there, who took his life and took his last breath, why are they not accountable? And what was the situation of what went wrong there? Is just mind-boggling. My brother is not a big guy at all. My brother was 5'6", 5'5", 140 pounds, Caucasian, had a beard, very, very friendly, loving. He's a father. He has two beautiful young girls. So again, it's just what makes this happen is just disturbing. And to know that there are so many other families out there who are going through the same thing is really frustrating. And I think that's what really brings awareness in this conversation up to the table. And for you to be hosting these platforms, guys, is just great. So people understand what is truly happening in the world today.
How did you find out about it?
So I found out actually from my dad. The Clark County police actually had called my mom. My mom had called my dad. My dad had called me, and that's how we found out. So we had found out within it was about 8 hours later. So we had found out the following day. He did have a couple tattoos that were did give some identification marks from him. So we were able to identify him really quick. But the police reports didn't come out right away, so we didn't know what had happened. The footage came out in a news conference. I believe it was about several days later, and that's when we had found out that the police were the ones who actually killed him. They obviously didn't tell us the situation about how he was killed, just that he was really deceased. And then once we had saw the video, that was with a really eye-opening situation. And there was video from the Sally Port and from the police officers in the detention center that had all the video. And we are just so thankful that there was live video, because they would have never have shown that. They would have never admitted to what was happening. And so they had to go public with that information. And that's when we realized there was a huge problem.
And so you got to take a look at the video, and what was the response of Metro during all this time? Did they reach out to you? Did you have any communication with them at all?
So there was a detective that had reached out to us for a little bit, and he was trying to do the criminal aspect of the investigation of figuring out where he was, and what was going on. It was very minor. They weren't telling us a lot of information, just the bare necessities of it. Um, but they definitely were not telling us essentially that, they had they had killed him. And obviously, once we had found that out, the change in the tone obviously changed really quickly. And we were like, the video is really clear, and they, were so adamant at that point that we will do internal investigations. We will get to the bottom of this, and we will hopefully get justice for your family. Well, that was the last that any police officer had ever done or looked into. So they may have done internal investigation, but when we did a fact finding case about 11 months later, they had said that there was no wrongdoing.
So that was the conclusion that they came up with, as they had said that they were going to investigate it, and ultimately their decision was that everything that they did was within the protocol of police work.
It didn't even necessarily say that. They didn't even say that it was within protocol. They just said they were not liable, and they did not, we can't tell you, that he died because of us. They just kept it. Everything was very generic. They didn't say, we found this way, or this is our procedure. We found it, because of XYZ. This is our procedure of what we do. They didn't tell us any of that, and none of that was brought up, because I think they know that everything was against their procedure and against their policy.
Once you finally did connect with them again, what was your next step?
So really, it was trying to gather as much information as we could, from them. So we were trying to be our own investigators and trying to figure out the details of, what he was doing in Vegas, and why he was, at this hotel, and could the situation have been avoided, and why weren't the police officers just willing to help him and talk with him when they got to the hotel? Why couldn't this all just have been avoided? And so those were some of our biggest questions. Is something so silly as a trespassing ends in a homicide? I think there's a huge disconnect there. And so that's where we were trying to figure out what was going on. And then from there, we didn't hear anything from Metro or Clark County for about 11 months. Essentially, following that, they said, we won't release any paperwork. We won't release the autopsy. We won't release our fact findings. We won't do any of that until we provide until the DA says that we can show it to you, and provide it to you, and during our fact finding case, which is typically held 11 to 12 months after. So that entire time, you're waiting in limbo, trying to figure out what is going on. And hey, maybe there's a glimmer of hope that, they saw the justice that needs to happen. And so that's what we were really hoping for. Is, it's very apparent. Anyone who watches the video, you can clearly see that they killed him. How could anyone in their right mind, look at that differently? And I think that's where, we want to tell our story, and we have joined forces with NISA and Force Trajectory, who have other families have been killed, by Las Vegas Metro. Force Trajectory represents a ton of families who have been killed by Las Vegas Metro. And I think that's where, this is just really getting out of hand, is looking at all these families that have been killed recently, and what are the ways that we can prevent this from happening more?
And as a family, of course, you're dealing with the loss of a family member, which is always a traumatic experience, no matter what. What were what was the feeling within your family, other than obviously grief from losing your brother, when you're involved in something like this and you have a lot of questions that are unanswered? What were the dynamics within your family, and what are they now going forward?
Yeah, guy. I mean, that is, really where it comes down to is we were lost. We had no idea what to do. We had no idea where we were going, which route to take, which questions to ask, who to turn to, um, you know, who to get answers to. When the police weren't answering any questions, where do you go to? I mean, not only were we emotionally upset, but now our frustration was really getting to us, because we were, it's just a roadblock of going nowhere. And so, where do you get these answers, and how, and who's there to help you? And Las Vegas Metro wasn't there to try to help us or console, and provide us the answers. They just try to, tell you, wait a year and we'll maybe tell you, well, what happens in the meantime? Here, he's got two daughters that are 12 and 9, wondering when their father is going to come home. What do you tell his daughters who keep asking where dad is? um and so we didn't have the answers. And then, when we finally realized that, here, these are little girls who have always looked up to police officers, and now you're going to tell them that their father was killed by police officers. It is so wrong. I mean, there was a couple videos that went onto social media right away as the videos were published, and anyone can go look them up just under YouTube. Um, and they people just got irate because of the frustration of everyone saw what was going on. The video was just so clear of that, when the officers are holding my brother's head down, he goes completely limp. He loses consciousness instantly, and that there's a huge problem that needed to happen. So it is a really, it's just a really lack of support and policy and procedure that happened there. So that really rolled onto our family as we were struggling to kind of make sense of what was going on, and try to get answers and try to figure out a way to get justice. But we didn't know really where to turn to. Force Trajectory has been great in helping us tell our story, and learning to cope with other families who are dealing with the same thing. And really, what we want to do is we want to change, people's approach and the policies that are going on, so that way this stuff doesn't happen to more people. I mean, we're just the common everyday folk that you think this could never happen to you. That was 100% us. We never thought this could happen to us. And sure enough, the next day you get a phone call saying that, your brother or your father or your son has been killed. And again, that, this could happen to the next person that gets put in the restraint chair tomorrow. And so what can we do to really avoid that is really, what we've been trying to use to help us get through this is, we want help, we want change, we want accountability, and we want transparency. So those are things that have really come up that, our family has been struggling with. And we're getting help, we're seeing ways to get around this, and we have a great support system to keep our family close. It'll never bring Nick back, though, and it'll never give these girls their father back, which is just such a shame. And he had so much to offer and has been missed by so many people. And so, how do we make that right? And how do we serve justice for not only him, but for the community?
And you had mentioned becoming a part of Force Trajectory and interacting with these other families who've been through similar situations to what you're going through with all the uncertainty that you had described. What are some of the things that have benefited your family being a part of an organization like this in terms of being able to connect with these families who've been down your road before?
Yeah. Yeah, well, no offense to Force Trajectory, but it's a shame that Force Trajectory has to exist, right?
Mm.
Um, it, it's just too bad that there is groups like this where there's tons of families that have been affected and killed by just one Las Vegas Metro Police Department. So the coalition is great in that we can get together and hear these stories and really come out of the similarities. If it wasn't for Force Trajectory, you wouldn't know about these other situations and what are the commonalities and all of these things that are weird. You're like commonly occurring about, yeah, they did the same thing to me, and yeah, they won't tell us of what's going on, and uh, we won't get the same answers. And yes, it took our family 12 months to get the same thing too. And hearing some of the ways that these other family members have struggled and gone through some of it, it's really tough. But it really kind of brings you together as a group to know that there is a lot more people out there, and that gives you a more uh, fuel to fight for justice. That this wasn't just a one-time circumstance. This happens all the time, and Force Trajectory is really great on making that known that this is happening more than a lot of people think, and that this needs to be known so that way we can make change in today's society. So I think what Force Trajectory brings is really a family and a community of struggling families that can use this to hopefully make change together, and we hope that more families and communities also develop groups like this in other cities, so that way there is recognition about what is happening, because a lot of it is brushed under the rug and covered up, and the police are definitely not going to be one to share these stories about what is happening. And I think that's part of the reason is when you see this outrage happening is people just think it just happened to George Floyd. It was this one time thing. I don't understand why people are upset. Well, that is just the tipping point. That was just the match that started the fire. Right here, you had all this wood and all this ammunition that just needed to get sparked to get this really taken off. And I think that's what really is kind of going on here is really there's a lot of stories out there, and we want to share those stories so people can understand the other side, and tell our stories from from the perspective of what's really happening with the family.
And with you witnessing all of this, we're in a time in our history where police brutality and police reform is something that's in the headlines every day. People are talking about it all the time. Again, we've had the death of George Floyd, and so much has happened as a result of that. And your perspective has, as you had mentioned, has really changed a lot based on your experience. What is it like for you watching all of this, having had this experience with your brother?
So two main things is uh, first is the riots and the violence is super frustrating. That has got to end. So any of the riots and the violence, that is absolutely uncalled for. Now the rest of it that goes along with it, the protest and the marches to bring peace and bring change, is amazing. That is where it really brings out a lot. It and it brings light that, hey, there really is these other situations. So I encourage people to continue to stand up and protest in a peaceful way, and to recognize that change is needed. Change is needed now. It was needed a long time ago. So I think that, the George Floyd case is really bringing a lot of recognition to the stage. But these stages are happening all over the place. And so Las Vegas is our stage. And we want to make sure that, the Las Vegas and Nevada citizens know what's going on um, in their area. And so it should be known in public information that there is a lot of stuff that, the police aren't being held accountable. There's no transparency. This is happening a lot more than people think. It's happening with all kinds of different religions, different races, different demographic groups. It's happening a lot more than people think. So these people can need to continue to voice their opinion, and let's be heard, so we can kind of make change. And so, I we there was a reporter that did a story in the characteristics similar to George Floyd and my brother. Both loving fathers, both killed from positional asphyxia. Lots of similarities. So again, but we are just one in two families that are happening this, and this is happening to tons of people across the U.S. So that's really is what we want the light of all this to be coming to, is realizing that this is more than George Floyd. This is more than Nick Farah. This is more than everyone else. This is happening to tons of people.
And Eric, what do you say to the people out there who they look at this and they say, your brother was in custody, so he must have done something that got him put into custody, and without the understanding that you've mentioned, that you've gained, and that a lot of people have gained when they've actually experienced something like this, what would you say to the people that don't have that broader perspective and keep just zeroing in on the fact that your brother was in custody, he got himself there, and something like this happened to him? How would you respond to someone, or have you had to respond to someone who said something like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who will post some very ignorant things on social media and hide behind a screen. I think one of the biggest things is to fully understand the picture. But regardless of the person or the reason that someone was arrested, they should never be killed. There is no reason that violence and the people who are supposed to be out there protecting our society and our the people should be killing people, whether it's on accident or on purpose. So there should be policies in place that these things don't happen by accident. So I think it's part of the reason of just understanding of figuring out, he was a very loving person. What if, your brother or someone that you knew was killed because they made one mistake? It doesn't matter if it was a little mistake or a large mistake. Again, they should never have their lives taken for that. So again, there's a lot of people in society who really offer a lot. And everyone comes from a different perspective. So everyone may offer or bring different things to society these days. And maybe it's just personality, maybe it's love, maybe it's happiness. You know, but to take someone's life, again, a father. Now his daughters don't have anything, because he was trespassing, and again because he didn't have a way off the property. Um, there's no person that should ever be able to justify that the minor or major offense taken would ever give the right to ever take someone's life, and I think that's the big thing to take away.
What would you say has? Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I just wanted to point out as well as we were talking, there are a lot of good police officers out there, and a majority of them are good. So I'm not characterizing and not saying that I still have a bad stigma against police officers. I just want there to be change and transparency and accountability for when mistakes happen. Just like in any profession, if a mistake does happen, they need to be accountable, just like a doctor or any other profession. That when mistakes do happen, there's usually consequences for that, and that's what needs to happen. Unfortunately, with the police department is when they make mistakes, A, there needs to be change to it, and B, they need to be accountable, and C, there needs to be transparency so people know about it, and so that we can figure out this in the future. So that's really what we're really up against. Is we're not against police officers. We're for change and accountability and transparency.
And you've never experienced anything like this, and very few people have. What surprised you the most about this case and just every aspect of it? What your interactions with the police? What really surprised you about this?
Well, be super naive about it. I mean, our family never thought something like this would ever happen. Um, and I think that goes with any family who has been killed by police. Is they never knew or thought that this was ever going to happen. That's our biggest thing. And then second would be the accountability and the transparency. Why wouldn't there be change, or why should these people, police officers, just be let go or not even recommended? They're back on the police force doing the exact same thing the way that my brother was killed. We have a report saying that, someone else was put in the exact same restraint chair, held the exact same way, and he was the same person that held my brother down and killed him. This just happened several weeks ago. So that is the most mind-boggling thing. Is what if your son or brother or daughter was put into that restraint chair tomorrow and didn't make it? That's how serious this is. You never know where you may end up, or what may happen, or if you may get into a predicament. No one will ever know or see that. It's just, like you could be driving down the road and you could get in an accident, same thing. But again, why is there no ways to change it? That's why they put stoplights up, or that's why they, do, different ways to protect people, put airbags in cars. These are all changes that evolve from situations that happen. But why is there no change in accountability in Metro? Why should more families have to suffer and go through the same thing like we're going through? And that's the frustrating and the most thing that is really, just doesn't make any sense, and surprising, because you think they would be the ones. They're tied to politicians. They know the ins and outs. They have accessibility to make change and make a difference in the world. Here's your chance. Now's your time. Let's go to the forefront. Let's realize that there's a lot of issues at hand. We need accountability, transparency, and justice.
And if you could have your way, and that you would get all the answers that you needed, and this would work out in a way that would create justice for everyone, what would that look like?
Well, to start with, the restraint chair would be banned. Um, they're still using the restraint chair in just take the example, Phoenix alone. They've had several cases like this where people have been killed, and they've taken away the restraint chair. So the restraint chair has killed a lot of people over the years. A lot of people. My brother's not the first one. This happens all the time. So why is the restraint chair still being used? Why is there no other means of it? So other states and counties have already banned it. Why is Las Vegas Metro still using it? It kills people. So I think that is the number one thing. Is what we would like to see is make change in Clark County Detention Center, so more families don't have to go through this tragedy. And then after that is really accountability and transparency. keeping these people accountable for what happened. You know, making sure that they know that there was a mistake making or policy that was bad. So change the policy, change the procedure, you know, set some discipline, um, and let's get real to it and figure out what we can do to change. So I think those are the biggest things that we would like to really see out of the change is more accountability and transparency, helping families deal with tragedies. And that's part of what Force Trajectory helps out as well, as helping families, you know, cope and deal with some of these situations and make change. So I think that's, you know, more coalitions like Force Trajectory would, you know, would be great too as well.
What do you miss the most about not having your brother around?
I miss his wittiness. So he's very witty. He's funny. His sense of humor. And I think I speak behalf of his daughters that I miss seeing him interact with them. That was the huge thing. Just them running up to him, hugging him, and you know, just telling him, "Daddy, I love you," and giving him a kiss. Seeing him care for them, getting him ready for school in the morning, and just helping them with their littlest things. Um, you know, that's something that we really miss. And it was Father's Day this past year, and one of his daughters had called me and told me that, you know, how much they really missed him and they loved him, and you know, that they were thinking about him, and that, you know, we are all our family, but and that, you know, they all love us together, but they really miss him. That they're thinking about him, they're praying about him. We're all are, but just to hear the the issues going on is just so sad. And we really, you know, want that to be known as, you know, their his daughters are going to struggle for the rest of their life without a dad. So we need to pull it together now to try to help them. And that's, you know, I love being able to help. But in no situation should any family member ever have to take or stand in place of their father.
And Nisa, Eric had mentioned before that he wishes that an organization like yours did not have to exist, which is an interesting answer that I haven't heard so far in these interviews that we've done. What is your response to that? And how could the world be different in the way that we wouldn't need an organization like yours, or we wouldn't need to even be doing these interviews? How could things be different?
I wholeheartedly agree with Eric. I really.
Oh
Is
yeah,
there some feedback? Can you guys hear me? Okay. I wish I didn't have to do this work. I wish Force Trajectory didn't exist, and it's actually our goal to not exist. You know what I mean? So I'm in full agreement with Eric. I think it's really an injustice that we do exist. It's a strange anomaly. This marginalization of those directly impacted. It's been happening for generations. Those directly impacted don't have a voice due to the corporate structure and of the media and the symbiotic relationships that they already have with the DA and with the police and crime reporting. You know, mainstream journalism does not do a good job in reporting police violence narratives, and that's a large part of the problem. And that's a large reason why we exist, is because we want to play that role as journalists and not redefine, but go back to what is the purpose of journalism, right? The purpose of journalism is reporting the voice of the community, is to be that voice for the community. And if you're a journalist and you're looking at a police violence narrative and you're only going to the police for the narrative that happened in a case that they're involved with, where their own officers took the life of a civilian, that's not fair and balanced journalism. But what we're finding and what we have found due to research, academic research, is that is 90 99% of the case. That's how mainstream journalism operates in these cases. So, I just think it's a tragedy that we have to do this. My hope is that by doing this work and by leading by example, that we encourage other people in the community to participate in creating storytelling platforms for families. We do this nationwide, but there's just no way as an organization that we could realistically cover, so many different stories. We do our best. We are small, and we also do train interns, and we have journalists a part of our group, and we do a lot of training, and that's kind of where we're at, is really focusing on getting other advocates and journalists and media makers trained to do this work. And it takes a very particular kind of personality. I mean, that person has to be able to write stories, but they also have to be very personable and be able to keep long-term relationships with families who are living with long-term trauma and will be for the rest of their lives. So it's kind of a marrying between, social work and activism and journalism, and it's difficult work, but we are here because, I mean, I'm tired. I'm tired of hearing so much injustice, and I'm tired also of families not being heard. Um, so yeah, but I can't
Oh
remember
no,
the
you
other part of your
pretty
question. I'm
well
sorry.
answered it. Is that again? It would the ideal circumstances would be that you wouldn't have to do the work that you're doing. Another question that I have for you is, aside from the fact that a family member has died, when they come to you, what are some of the other commonalities? I know you had touched on the narrative, and seeing the same narrative over and over and over again with all these different cases. What are some of the other commonalities aside from that narrative that you seem to experience with all these families like Eric's that come and start working?
Um, I would say that just what Eric said, everyday people. We're most of the it's interesting because we've been doing this work for 11 years, and I have yet to work with a family where I'm like, oh well, your loved one died in a justifiable homicide. You know what I'm saying? And it's like the way that the police rule these cases, like in Eric's case, right? In Nicholas's case, his case was considered a justifiable homicide, but yet in the eyes of the public, that is not the case. It's the police department that has that discretion, right? And so as long as the police have that ability to police themselves and investigate themselves, well, we're not going to see change. So I would say one of the main commonalities that I see is that we're talking about everyday people. A lot of the times they're not doing anything wrong. A lot of the times they're not doing, I mean, they're just being pointed out as suspects, and then all of a sudden they're targeted. That's I would say is one of the biggest commonalities, is that there's no advocacy for these families. They're lost. When you meet them, they're in shock and they're in trauma. And another one that is very common is that the healing isn't. People think that, oh, okay, well, this is a traumatic event, and eventually I'll heal from this. I hear families time and time again saying that the hole in their heart doesn't actually heal. There are moments where they feel better, and usually those moments are when they're in the company of other families who they've bonded with because of the experience that they share. But we have families that we've known who have been fighting for over 20 years, and they're very strong and resilient people. They're the strongest and most resilient people I've actually ever met in my life. But they'll tell you straight up that it doesn't matter if it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that pain doesn't go away, mainly because there's no justice, there's no closure, and there's no acknowledgement from the state that, there's no acknowledgement that, oh yes, we did wrongfully take away your loved one, and we're sorry. Not even that, right? So it's just very, very difficult. And my heart goes out to all families who are impacted by this terrible, atrocious system.
And by coming together and being a part of a support group basically for families who had this similar experience. There's a lot of empowerment. I know in the interviews that I've done so far, a commonality that I'm hearing in all these interviews is this sense of empowerment that Eric talked about, and being able to come together with other people to share a unique human experience. And again, that's really what the Voices of Humanity is all about, the platform for this show that was developed as a result of you and I wanting to share the human experience in a severe tragedy such as this. But for these families to be able to come together with this common experience and be empowered in that, and to be able to build and to work towards change. And I know that Eric talked quite a bit about that in his interview today, that the value of this is being able to take these situations and build on them. And before we came on the air today, we were talking about some of the legislation that's necessary in order to start to affect the type of change that Eric was talking about. Could you talk about that? What are some of the changes that have to happen in society and within the legislation of our state to make the changes?
Sure. So, police violence is fought, state by state. There are some Supreme Court cases that impact the whole nation federally, and I want to say that it's two Supreme Court cases that need to be overturned, and that's Tennessee versus Garner and Connor versus Graham. In these cases, what happened was the decision of these Supreme Court cases has heavily impacted every single police homicide case in the nation. Um, the the ruling basically allows for a police officer to use lethal force if they feel, one, that their life is in danger, and this is all perception based. So again, this is at the police's discretion, and then two, if they believe that the suspect that they're apprehending is about to hurt another person. So that's why we see a lot of these cases of people being shot in the back. It ends up being a justifiable homicide, and it's due to those two Supreme Court cases. So that in and of itself, that needs to be a federal a movement against these Supreme Court cases. It needs to be a national movement to overturn these two cases, and that would heavily impact the way these cases are ruled. Second, these cases are normally, again, as I mentioned before, fought state by state, right? So it's critical for people who are, well, everybody, for civilians in any state to get involved in local politics, in state politics, and understand the roles that people are playing. So that means judges, that means district attorneys. District attorneys are major gatekeepers of what happens. Here in Clark County, which is in Las Vegas, Clark County District Attorney Steve Wolfson has allowed probably around 60 to 70 police homicides happen under his watch, with absolutely no interest in indicting anyone. The one cop that he did indict, kind of indict, was Kenneth LaPera, who died by the same way that Nicholas Farah passed away as well. Positional asphyxia. It was a lateral, I forget the name, LVNR. That's the chokehold that Kenneth LaPera utilized on Tashi Brown and took his life. And that happened in May of 2017 on Mother's Day. So you can only imagine how Trinita, the mother, is feeling. And it's like, that's the only time that he indicted, and it wasn't really, it was a political move. He did it because it was re-election season. He knew that people were going to be really upset about this and that he needed to appease the public. He did that, but then utilized a grand jury, which he didn't have to do, and relied on their decision to decide whether or not to follow through with the indictment. And he sabotaged it himself by hiring expert witnesses from an institution called the Force Science Institute, which is basically police officers with academic degrees. And in their entire history, they've never ruled not in favor of the police. So he sabotaged his own grand jury. They chose not to indict the officer who killed Tashi Brown. And here we are today. Who knows? That case, had they indicted him, had they prosecuted him, had they set a precedent in the state, Nicholas might be alive today. And that's where the shame really is. Another thing that people need to pay attention to is these legislative sessions that happen with our elected officials, our senators, our state senators, and our assemblymen. They're the ones that write the laws for the entire state. So it's critical for people to pay attention to who they're putting in office and then holding them to the promises that they make to the community. We just had the 32nd special session here in Nevada, and it was, the reason why they had these special sessions was because of the $1.2 billion deficit due to the coronavirus. And so in the second special session, they introduced two police accountability and transparency bills. The first one is called AB 3, sponsored by Chairman Steve Yeager. And that particular bill bans chokeholds. It also prioritizes medical care for police violence victims. It mandates drug and alcohol testing for officers who have just used force. And then it also mandates the creation of a database to collect data on police stops so that we know what the police are doing. The problem with this bill, it passed. So it passed in the Assembly and then it passed in the Senate. And so now it's on its way to the governor. Governor Sisolak will have to sign off on it. And then it'll become law. The issue with this bill is that it has no teeth. How are we to know whether or not the officers end up getting drug tested after and alcohol tested after a use of force incident? The public could not know that. That's not something that we could know unless the police tell us. So again, the issue with this bill is that everything is still within the police discretion. And so until that changes, I don't believe anything will change. It's a step in the right direction. We can continue to work and move forward. And we plan on doing that by getting elected officials to connect with directly impacted people like Eric and his family so that they can really understand the heart of the issue. The second bill is SB 2, which is a revision of SB 242, which was passed last year. SB 242 is an amendment to the Nevada Peace Officer Bill of Rights. This is another piece of legislation, like the Supreme Court cases, that needs to be overturned nationwide, state by state. The Nevada Peace Officer Bill of Rights first emerged in 1974. It kind of hides itself as a labor piece of legislation. So the police union has basically over time lobbied year after year to strengthen the Peace Officer Bill of Rights. And what it's created is a veil of secrecy around police violence. It's allowed for misconduct files to be sealed so that when officers hurt and kill civilians, we don't know their record. So we don't know their prior record. And this is completely due to this piece of legislation. And so the SB 2 is a revision of SB 242, which is an amendment to the Peace Officer Bill of Rights. And it does improve the situation a little bit, but again, it's not enough. I mean, basically, SB 242, which was passed last year, didn't allow for officer statements that are made during an internal investigation to be utilized in civil lawsuits. Much of the time, in these cases, like in the case of Nicholas Farah, the family will not get a criminal case because the DA will not indict, right? Will not prosecute the officer. So then they have to turn to a civil suit to get some kind of closure, compensation, investigation. And so SB 242 took away that ability for families and victims to be able to utilize officer statements made in the internal investigation in their civil lawsuit. So SB 2 actually corrects that. It allows for that those statements to be utilized. But again, everything is under police discretion, so who knows what's really happening. The second thing that it does is that it extends the statute of limitation on being able to file allegations against a police officer for misconduct. That SB 242 limited that to 1 year, which is ridiculous because in most cases, just like what Eric said, the public fact-finding review for his brother's case didn't happen until 11 months after the murder. So how is a family supposed to get it together within a month to file a civil lawsuit? It doesn't make sense. So they extended that to 5 years, which again is better. But really what needs to happen is a full attack on the Nevada Peace Officer Bill of Rights, NRS 289. And the families over the last several weeks have been working on demands, and they issued 40 demands, which includes the repeal of 242 and also the abolishment of police unions and also the repeal of NRS 289, the Nevada Peace Officer Bill of Rights. Sorry, it was a lot to explain.
I was just going to that it, and just the craziest thing is in 2019, SB 242 was introduced and passed just last year. This gave, the even police more reason not to be transparent and hide more information. So just last year, instead of getting better, we actually tightened everything up for them. So I think that is like the craziest thing, is instead of like realizing there's issues out there, 242 actually gave more power to the police unions and said, we don't need to disclose this information more, and we don't need to be accountable. So that is just crazy. I mean, that's where we really need to repeal 242 and work on new things. And so we encourage, lawmakers and other groups and senators in the House to reach out to groups like Force Directory so we can get some input about, how we can help and what things would be better for society from our perspective. And that's one thing that, we really want some more more voices to be heard so they can understand these people who are making these decisions, where our families are coming from. So we invite them to our meetings. So we hope that, one day some of them will take us up on that.
It seems like accountability was the biggest theme of this particular interview here on the Voices of Humanity. And Eric, again, I offer you my condolences for the loss of your brother. But in listening to you, I hear you got a lot of spunk in you to pursue this. And so I wish you nothing but all the best as you've had this horrible loss, and yet that you have the strength to continue on with your spunk to affect change, just as Nisa is with the things that she's doing. And yeah, you're a brave guy. I appreciated the opportunity to talk to you about a very delicate and tragic story.
Thank you so much. As Nisa, for 11 years doing. So we are fighting, and we will continue to fight for my brother and all the other families who are part of Force Trajectory, and any other family who's not part of it but who has been affected by Metro, and for the people in the future who may be affected by Metro. So I appreciate your platform, Guy, and letting us share our story. And for all the viewers and people listening out there I hope this has opened their eyes a little bit more, and just realize, where we're coming from, and that there's always a different circumstance and situation out there. So thank you so much for bringing awareness to this.
And as always, Nisa, I always appreciate you bringing someone to help open our eyes a little more with each story. And I look forward to the next, even though I wish that we didn't have to interview a next person, I know that we will. And so as always, your contribution to this is extremely important.
Thank you. And I also just want to commend Eric, because Eric lives in Arizona, and Nicholas didn't even live in Las Vegas. Eric is the fact that he's stepping up to the plate to represent his brother and his family, and submitting public testimony to the Nevada State Legislature really shows that he cares about this issue. This is not his residence. This is not Nicholas's residence. It's just really atrocious that somebody could come here for a layover and get impacted by this mess. So thank you, Eric, for doing that. It means a lot to Nevadan residents, and I just wanted to acknowledge you for doing that, because you certainly don't have to.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for tuning in to the Voices of Humanity show here at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. Stay tuned for more broadcasts about elements of humanity that are important. And we really are developing a platform here to, with the new media that we have, to be able to give people a place to come and tell their story in a non-traditional sense. And that truly this is about making it happen with regular people, and understanding that behind these news stories that you watch on major news networks, and that there is a story that's presented there, but there's always more to the story. And that's what the Voices of Humanity is all about. We're looking forward to future broadcasts. We're going to be having a broadcast on the 14th of August, which will be about the front lines of coronavirus. We're going to be having a nurse from UMC Medical Center here in Las Vegas that's going to be sharing a lot about the things that are happening with people who are on the front line and dealing with coronavirus every day. A host of other broadcasts about other things that reflect things that humans are experiencing, and just giving people a place to talk. So stay tuned again. Stay tuned to prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media, for shows such as this, the love of business, sports shows, politics, and other things. Take care of yourselves and see you soon.